Welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I've done a review. The last band I did was Kiss. I haven't really looked at what's coming up, but I haven't done a video in a while. I figured I would do something that was pretty big. This band was the biggest in the 70s, and they're still probably one of the biggest, most recognized, most well-known rock bands of all time. The band I'm talking about is Led Zeppelin. This, of course, is a bootleg copy I have of Live on Blueberry Hill, Led Zeppelin. I'll get to that later. So, my initiation into Led Zeppelin, and I'll say that because I think if you really are a Zepp head, if you really love Led Zeppelin, there was a moment when you heard the band and you went, yep, that's it. For some people, it was Stairway to Heaven. Some people rock and roll. Some people Kashmir. We'll get into those songs and those albums later. But for me, it was Led Zeppelin 3. Led Zeppelin 3 is a bit of a forgotten album in a mix of a lot of their big albums. It had songs like The Immigrant Song and a great one called Bronjar Stomp. Bronjar was a place in Wales that Led Zeppelin recorded. That was the name of the town. And it's on the lighter side of Zeppelin. It's folky, a lot of acoustic guitar, kind of Zeppelin, and it's really kind of black country, Northern England, Wales music that just really resonated with me. I loved it. Right from the opening notes of Led Zeppelin 3, what's the song? Immigrant Song. It touched me. I really loved that album. And then I listened to Led Zeppelin 4, and that was a whole other ballgame. So Led Zeppelin came out in 1960. They got together in 1968. First album, 1969. Debut album, just entitled Led Zeppelin. Why were they called Led Zeppelin? Keith Moon from The Who, the drummer, said that they go down like a lead balloon. And hence the name Led Zeppelin. They spelled it Led Zeppelin, L-E-D, instead of L-E-A-D, which is the proper spelling of lead, because they didn't want the thick Americans to think they'd be called Lead Zeppelin. So L-E-D, Led Zeppelin it was. First album came on the scene like nothing before it. It was an absolute powerhouse. Dazed and Confused, You Shook Me, Communication Breakdown, How Many More Times. This is a classic, heavy, bluesy album that if you're bored and you're sick of the Zeppelin you hear on the radio all the time, this might be an album to check out. And particular note, John Bonham. Arguably the greatest drummer of all time. Many people say that. I said it for many years. Do I say that he's the greatest now rock and roll drummer? I don't know, man. Pretty incredible for many reasons, but I'll get to him later. Fantastic debut album. Jimmy Page came from the Yardbirds. He was the last of the three Yardbirds. There was Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. Formed a band with two bandmates, Robert Plant, John Bonham, who did some gigging together. They're in the same band in Wales. And John Paul Jones, very famous session musician, great bass player. Did a lot of music with a lot of different big names in the 1960s. And probably one criminally underrated bass player, Jonesy. Fantastic bass player. John Baldwin is his actual name. John Paul Jones, just an alias. First album, fantastic. Then cometh the great Zeppelin 2, opening with Whole Lotta Love. Jimmy Page was experimenting with a lot of different pedals, different guitars, different styles, and I can't remember what pedal it was. Forgive me, I'm not a guitarist, I'm a drummer. But it gave it that sound, that really great echoey kind of sound. And right from the notes of this album, you kind of knew what you're getting into. Whole Lotta Love, the Lemon Song, Heartbreaker is a great album, or a great song. Rambling On. Now, the song I want to talk about as a drummer on here is Moby Dick. Moby Dick is a fantastic drum solo, which is essentially what it is. Jimmy lays down a really great track to open Moby Dick, but John Bonham takes it poof, to the stratosphere with his incredibly fast triplets and is just heavy-handed on the drum set. It became an instrument of anger almost for Bonzo. And Why was he called Bonzo? Well, John Bonham's nickname Bonzo was after the clown in England because he was a very jovial guy, apparently by all accounts. And so he was very clownish until he drank. And then he turned into a bit of a prick. But I don't want to get into that. Fantastic drummer. Zeppelin 2, excellent album. Now, the next album I don't have. I have it on CD. I don't have it on record. And it's the one that I heard, Zeppelin 3, with the opening of Immigrant Song. I believe it has Tangerine. If you think Zeppelin is all about heavy, heavy, hard rock, listen to Tangerine, I beg you. Because there's a lot more to Led Zeppelin than you just hear on the radio. Like Whole Lotta Love, like Stairway to Heaven. But Zeppelin 3 really is a great album, and it's on the lighter side for them. And then came the classic Led Zeppelin 4. This is the most classic Zeppelin album in the lineup. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows probably almost every song on here. Interesting thing about this album is some people call it Zeppelin 4, some people call it The Ruins, because you can see the ruins of a house. It's been torn down, and you can see the picture left there. So who's in that picture? Some devil guy. I don't know. Jimmy Page was in the occult, some kind of occult figure. This album garnered a lot of mystique because of Zeppelin's dabbling in the occult. And I don't know. They were young in their 20s, probably high and drunk. How seriously they took it, I don't know. I have played Stairway to Heaven backwards, though. And it does scare you a bit because it says something a little bit frightening. But anyway, there's the inside of the album. So the songs on here, I mean, I don't need to get into them. Rock and Roll, Stairway to Heaven. I mean, you know, one of the most classic ones. Let's get the record here. Have a sec. One sec. When the Levee Breaks. One of my favorite tracks of Zeppelin. Heavy, bluesy, thick, powerful, and the drums. I played the drums before for you. How that opening to When the Levee Breaks starts. It's absolutely fantastic. Now that, of course, is a very crude rendering of the opening of When the Levee Breaks, but the reason it sounds so big and so potent is because they couldn't fit John Bonham's drum kit in the castle. They recorded the place called Headley Grange, and it had this big archway, and they couldn't fit the drum set anymore, so they just left it there, and they mic'd it at the top of the railings, and so you got this echo, boomy, excellent track When the Levee Breaks. Led Zeppelin 4, what can you say? It's a fantastic record. There's not a bad song on it. Misty Mountain Hop, Four Sticks. Going to California, I mean, that's a beautiful ballad. When the Levee Breaks. Side 2, Black Dog, Rock and Roll, Battle Forevermore, which Robert Plant sang with Sandy Denny. I believe it was a duo with Sandy Denny. And then Stairway to Heaven. Now, look, if you look at Stairway to Heaven as an individual piece of music, not tied with a group, not tied with anything, and go back to when you heard it for the first time. Maybe it didn't impress you, but it fucking blew me away. How the song is layered, you know, how it progresses into this grandiose, you know, guitar solo at the end. And John Bonham has a lot to do at the end of that song too. Just cranking out the triplets right through. Just fantastic song, fantastic album. And then they came out with another really great one called Houses of the Holy. Now, there was a problem with the editing process on this album, and all of the little mermaid girls going up the rocks, they turned purple. I don't know if you can tell that on the camera, but and then on the inside, you can see that there's this weird figure sacrificing one of them to the gods, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, this is a really incredible album. Houses of the Holy is a very well-crafted album. I gotta say, it's probably one of the most thoughtful in terms of emotion music that Zeppelin did, because a lot of songs on here have an ethereal kind of creeping way about them. Really, really fun. No Quarter is a main song I'm talking about. If you can listen to No Quarter, there's a lot of really great organ work by John Paul Jones in that. Dancing Days, The Ocean, good song. The song remains the same is great, and it opens up with a 12-string guitar, not a traditional 6-string, which gives it a really great harmonic structure. It doesn't sound just like you're strumming a 6. It sounds, obviously like you're strumming a 12, but there's more beef to the sound, and I really like that. The Rain Song is another ethereal, slow building, a lot of great strings, violins in the middle of that song. It's a great tune. House of the Holy, really, for me, if I want something different to listen to, then House of the Holy is it. Because it's, as I said, it's an album that really, they put a lot of thought into, and I kind of dig that. So the next album they came out with was a very ambitious double album called Physical Graffiti. Now, Physical Graffiti, this came out in 1975. Forgive me for not saying the years of the albums, but they pretty much came out with an album a year. This was 75. House of the Holy was 73. Led Zeppelin 4 was 71. Led Zeppelin 2 was 70, and 69 was their debut. Now, Physical Graffiti was a double album. As I said, very ambitious. There's a lot of music on here, and there's a lot of great music on here. This is personally my favorite Led Zeppelin album because there's a great variety of thought and music. You go from country to blues to hard rock. And Robert Plant's singing has never been better than on this album. Jimmy Page, the way that he crafted the songs, the way that he organized them, not organized, but if it's going to be a double album, it's going to have a lot of thought put into it as good variety. And this is probably the greatest variety of rock and roll music you'll ever hear. Just straight rock and roll, rock, hard, bluesy rock. Custard Pie, The Rover, In My Time of Dying. Now, if you don't know these songs, you should get to know them. If you really like rock and roll, because these are a really great hard rock and thumping tunes. In My Time of Dying is an epic. It's an 11-minute long epic. And a good 2 or 3 minutes is just John Bonham's pounding bass drum. And it's a great side. Side 2, Houses of the Holy. Now, this was supposed to be on the album Houses of the Holy, but it didn't make it on, so they just called it that, and they put the actual song on Physical Graffiti. Trampled Underfoot, that's a real pounder too. And of course, Kashmir. Kashmir resonates with a lot of people. Kashmir is some Zeppelin fans' favorite song. Jimmy Page uses what's called a Dan Electro, a certain type of guitar to get that sound. And it's gorgeous. And of course the string section, the brass in it is gorgeous. Alex Van Halen always said that it took him 30 years to realize the song Kashmir wasn't about a sweater. Classic joke. Kashmir, of course, is the disputed area between Pakistan and India right now. And moving along to In the Light, Bronyar is a beautiful guitar piece. Down by the Seaside is a very light, sweeping, kind of folky song. Boogie with Stu. Now, Ian Stewart is the pianist for the Rolling Stones, was a founding member of the Rolling Stones, and was a good friend of Led Zeppelin. And Ian Stewart played on that piece, and that's why they called it Boogie with Stu. And it's great. I love Boogie with Stu. Anyway, I'm not going to keep on going with the songs, but there's a lot of great music on Physical Graffiti. 1976 or 77, I believe it was 1977's Presence. This is it here. Now this is where Zeppelin, for me, and for a lot of people, kind of took a bit of a nosedive. Led Zeppelin at that time was flying pretty high, and they ran into some bad luck. Robert Plant broke his leg. Prior to that, his son died. They had to stop a tour. I don't know what exact, I don't know if it was pneumonia or something, but Kid was only like 3 or 4 years old, so it was heartbreaking. Jimmy Page was in the throes of heroin addiction. That had started from about 73 onward, I think, somewhere around there. And the band was starting to unravel. They were. You could hear it musically. Now, I will say that Presence, which is kind of a cool album, especially a cool album cover. This album cover was done by Hypnosis. Now, Hypnosis was, I think they were British back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And they did a lot of album covers for bands. Dark Side of the Moon, they did that album cover. Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd, Presence. I've got a book with all their stuff. And so when I was a teenager, I really thought about this album, about what the hell does this thing mean? And so far as I can tell, it's just a manifestation of the force that's around us. Call it God, Chi, Feng Shui, whatever you want to call it. That's what this, this little thing here is. Anyway, it really only garnered for me a couple good songs, and one is an epic. Achilles' Last Stand, which is the first track on Presence, will show you how great a drummer John Bonham is. Very extremely fast, powerful tempo with a lot of intricate fills. Powerful and fast, great. But unfortunately for me, this album missed the mark. And I think it was one of the first where it didn't sell as great as the earlier ones, but I can't remember. So they took a bit of a break, came back a couple of years later with In Through the Outdoor, 1979. Now, In Through the Outdoor, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of In Through the Outdoor. It has its moments, and that's about all I can really say about this record. I don't know how it fared with the critics, because I'm sure I read it at some point in time, but All of My Love is a bit of a crooner. I'm not a big fan of it. A lot of songs on here are clunkers. I'm Gonna Crawl, I don't like. Hot Dog is a terrible, terrible version of Led Zeppelin trying to be country. I don't get it. I don't understand. Help me to understand that song. What the song or the album opens with, In the Evening, actually isn't too bad. It's a good song. But does it really garner back to the old Led Zeppelin stuff, like, from Led Zeppelin 4, Physical Graffiti? No, not at all. Not for me, unfortunately. But worth it for the diehards. Interestingly enough, this album cover came in 4 or 5 different album covers. So you can see he's sitting in a bar there. And there's about 4 or 5 versions of him in the bar. Now, this album came packaged in a brown paper bag, and it just had stamped Led Zeppelin on it. And you didn't know what was underneath it until you took the wrapper off. So, interesting marketing ploy to try and probably sell more albums. At some point in the mid-70s, might have been 76, 77, somewhere out there, they released The Song Remains the Same. It's a live album. Now, when it came out in 77, it was already outdated. This is 1973 footage from Madison Square Gardens. Is it Led Zeppelin at their greatest? No. They're not very energetic on stage. Again, they have their moments. I don't think Zeppelin ever put on a really bad show necessarily, from what I've heard. Although I will say that there were shows where Jimmy Page was so smacked out on heroin that he would be playing he had a double neck guitar, a double neck Gibson for some of the songs, because he couldn't switch from a 12-string guitar to a 6-string fast enough, like Stairway to Heaven. And he'd be strumming the bottom neck and doing the chords and the notes on the top. I mean, so I'm sure that would sound like ass. But anyway, it's a good album it's a good testament to what Zeppelin was live, because there's not a lot of great recorded live stuff, stock video footage. There has been since, and if you're a Zeppelin fan like I was for many years, check it out. There's a lot of really great footage put together of Zeppelin back in the day, and you can really see what they're like live, particularly in Australia. And the last album I have of Zeppelin's is Live on Blueberry Hill. It's a live album recorded at the LA Forum, 1970. It's famous because it's got a version of Fats Domino's Blueberry Hill. They did a great job of it. I mean, the swagger that goes into that song from Robert Plant, he sings it impeccably. I like it better than the original. Not that I'm a big fan of the original, but this is a great version. It's not the best sounding record because it's a bootleg, It's kind of cool though. It's one of my more valuable rock possessions. Came in two colored vinyl, red and blue. Um, it's an authentic bootleg because of it's got a pig sticker on it. Trademark of quality. If you actually look that up, that sticker that's on there, that means you got the real deal. So that's my review on Led Zeppelin. And just a couple quick, if you're still with me, a couple quick closing notes. Led Zeppelin has been overplayed on the radio. They've been pounded into the ground with numerous greatest hits packages and all that kind of shit. But if you strip it down and you look at what the band is and what they were an incredibly talented rock and roll band that had the world by the balls in the 1970s. There wasn't many bigger, maybe them and the Stones. That was it in the 70s. And I do like their music. I think that for what they were individually, they gelled in a way that just made the blues come alive. Just like Cream did before them, Led Zeppelin took hard rocking blues and they slowed it down and they cranked it up and they distorted it and fuzzed it and made it into this, this thick sludge of rock. But then, you know what? Then there's moments where it's just beautifully crafted, well played music that puts you in a great mood. So Led Zeppelin is quintessential rock and roll band, man. The best? I don't know. Tough to say. What is the best? Best to you is different than the best to me. So Led Zeppelin, fantastic band. I hope you enjoyed the review. Till next time.